We had read yesterday in the parsha, the portion of the week, how Moshe notices a burning bush, he approaches it, and he enters into a dialogue for a week where Hashem says to Moshe, you go to Egypt and you'll be the Redeemer, and you'll take my children out of Egypt. Moshe asks many questions, and what's behind all this being so obstinate is because he feels that if he agrees to be the Redeemer, his elder brother or older brother, Aaron, may be offended. Because until now, Aaron is the spokesman, is the prophet. Now, Moshe, the younger brother, he's chosen to be the Redeemer. And he comes up with many reasons why he feels he's not qualified. One of the questions he asked God was, when they asked me, what is his name? What is the name of this God? Meaning, how will it manifest itself? How will God manifest himself regarding this redemption? He takes us out of Egypt. So Hashem says to Moshe, V'yom Elokim Moshe, Eyeh asher eyeh. I will be, and I will be. And then the verse concludes, and he said, this is what you say to the Jewish people, Eyeh asher shlachani aleichem. Eyeh, singly, I will be. Originally he says, Eyeh asher eyeh, I will be and I will be. And then he concludes, just tell them, Eyeh asher shlachani aleichem. Eyeh sent you. That's all. That's what you should tell them. So over here, Rashi, in his commentary, cites the Midrash. What is the double expression, I will be and I will be? I will be them regarding this serious moment when you're in the state of bondage and strife and a situation which you can't deal with. I'm here to extricate you from this. I will be in future exiles. As I will I'm with you in this exile, I'll be with you in the future exile. That's the double Eyeh, Eyeh asher eyeh. I'm here with you now, I will be you in the future. So meaning within the name, he's forecast already, not only God will deal with the present problem, there are other problems which will happen in the future, meaning other exiles, and I will take them out of the future exiles. So Moshe Rabbeinu says to God, at this point where they're dealing with the present, what do we have to tell them about the future issues, the future problems? So Hashem says to Moshe, if that's the case, just speak about the present, don't speak about the future. This is AM, just mention one, the now, not the future. Okay, that's the simple understanding according to the Midrash. Over here, the Balaturim says he always deals with numerical values. What is the numerical value of Eyeh? The numerical value of Eyeh is 21. If you add up the letters of Eyeh, it's 21. And he says, if you take, we know there's the 13 attributes of mercy. Hashem, Hashem, Kel Rachem Chanun, the 13 attributes of mercy. He says, if you take the first letter of the first three attributes, Hashem, Hashem, Kel, you take the first letter of each one of those attributes. Yud, the first one is Yud Kei Vav Kei, that's Yud is 10. The second is Yud Kei Vav Kei, the first letter is 10. And then it's Kel. Kel is Aleph Lamed, so 10 and 10 plus 1 is 21. So we find Eyeh is 21, and the first three appellations for the God's name regarding the attributes of mercy, the first letter of the first three attributes adds up to be 21. Meaning the whole concept of God being involved and he is with us, it's an expression of his rachmim, of his mercy. That's 21. He says, if you take the first letter of the three patriarchs, first letter Avram is 1, Aleph. Yitzchak is what? First letter is 10. Yaakov is 10. So if you add up the first letters of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, it's 21. So again, Eyeh is 21. The first three attributes of mercy, the first letter of the three attributes is 21. The first letter of the patriarchs' names, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, adds up to 21. What does that mean? It means, why do we merit the mercy of God? Why is God with us? Yeah, I am with you. It's the merit of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. They're the patriarchs. They gave meaning to existence, okay? Not finished. If you take the first 5 Chumashim, not the first 5, we take the Torah itself is 5 Chumashim, 5 books. The first book is what? Is Bereshis. Bereshis starts with Beis. The second starts with Elishmos, and these are the names. Okay? The third one. Also, he says you have Beis, Vav, 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 and Aleph. If you add up those letters, it adds up to 21. You take the first letter of each one of the Chumashim, it adds up to 21. So again, A is 21. The first letter of the first 3 attributes of mercy is 21. The first letters of the 3 patriarchs adds up to 21. And the first letter of each one of the Chumashim add up to be 21. Meaning, why did we merit the Torah? We left Egypt, we were pagans. Why were the Jews able to transition to that level of clarity and to extricate themselves from all the negative effects of the bondage, to be able to say Nasav Nishmat Sinai? Why? And we merited the Torah, the 5 Chumash, 5 books of Moses. It's only in the merit of the patriarchs, because God says that ultimately, in your merit, your progeny will come to this level of understanding, and ultimately they're going to inherit the land. So again, everything goes back to 21. So the 5 books, we find that in Bamidbar, we know the Torah is very careful not to use too much verbiage. Unless it has to be said, the Torah doesn't repeat itself. But yet we find in one pasuk, in one verse, the word Bnei Yisrael is mentioned 5 times. Although we can use a pronoun, we'd have to keep continuously repeating Bnei Yisrael. In one verse, 5 times Bnei Yisrael. So Rashi cites the Midrash. If a person loves his son and he speaks about his son, does he use pronouns? He says, he always repeats his son's name. He doesn't say he. Why? Because every time he mentions his name, it evokes a certain feeling of love for that child. So therefore, continuously, that he mentions Bnei Yisrael 5 times in one pasuk, it's an expression of God's love for us. Because whenever he mentions our name, it brings a certain level of attachment to him. So Rashi says, why 5? Why not 6? Why not 10? Because 5 corresponds to the Chamisha Chumshi Torah. Corresponds to the 5 books of Moses. That's 5. What does that mean? The reason why the love is expressed, it's mentioned 5 times, which is the name being mentioned, repeated 5 times, is because it corresponds to the 5 Chumashim. What does one thing have to another? Why are the Jews special? Why do we have that special innate value? Is God playing favoritism? The reason why the Jewish people are special, because God offered the Torah to every one of the nations of the world, and they rejected it. They turned it down. The only nation which accepted it unequivocally were the Jewish people. So we're beloved to God. We have that special value to God because we accepted the Chamisha Torah, because we accepted the 5 books. Therefore, how is that love indicated? He mentions our name 5 times. Why is the dimension of the love? Because we gave meaning to existence, because the value of creation was the Chamisha Torah. This is Bereshis Bar Elokim. For the sake of Torah, the world was created. And which people are meeting that objective? The Jewish people. Therefore, you find in one pasuk, Bnei Yisrael mentioned 5 times, which is the expression of love. But why 5? Because we are the people who embraced the offer which God gave us by saying Nasa v'nishma. So therefore, it's the same thing. We start Ehyeh. God says, I will be with you. Ehyeh is 21. Through thick and thin, I will be with you. Now, we're not perfect. The reason why we went into exile, the way a person has a problem, because he's failed spiritually. The answer is because the first three attributes of the 13 attributes of mercy, the first letter of the first three attributes add up to be 21. But why do we merit that? Why do we merit that mercy? Because the first letter of each one of the avos, the patriarchs, adds up to be 21. It's only in their merit. That's what we merited. And what did we merit? What gives us that value? Because if you take the first letter of each one of the 5 chamoshim and add up the first letter, it adds up to be 21. This is the Baal HaTurim so far. This is our value. So it's interesting. Every Jew, regardless of where he's at, he's still a member, as we say, a member of the tribe. He's still a Jew. The Gemara tells us in Kedushin, God forbid, if a Jew becomes an apostate, he abandons Judaism. A Jew, even if he abandons Judaism, he's still a Jew. His DNA, his spiritual DNA, is still the DNA of the patriarchs. That doesn't change. He has to change his behavior. He doesn't have to change his essence. His essence is the same essence. Unfortunately, he went astray. But the actual core of every Jew is Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's what it is. Therefore, it's Ehyeh. God goes with us through thick and thin. Even when we go into exile, he's with us. We read later, God says, I'm with you, betoch tumosam. Even your contaminated status, when you go into exile, I am with you. Why? Because again, the core of the Jew never changes. Regardless of where we're at, the Jew could always revert back and become that fully committed Jew. Because the spirituality, the soul doesn't change. The soul of the Jew is a different soul than the soul of a non-Jew. We're not finished yet. Now, if you take Ehyeh Ashereh, you take Ehyeh, which is 21, and you add it up 2 Ehyehs. 21 and 21 is 42. What is 42? That one of the names of God is 42 letters. It's called Shem Shomem Bezosios. That name, which has special power, he gave it over to the Jewish people. We're aware of that name. If you add up Ehyeh, it says in the pasuk Ehyeh 3 times. If you add it up 3 times 21 is how much? 63. Okay. Now, Ehyeh 3 times, numerically 63. Now, this touched me immediately. How old was Yaakov when he received the birthright and the blessings from Yitzchak? How old was he? He was 63 years old. Yaakov fled from the home of his parents when he was 63 years old, and this is when he launched the dynamic to create the Jewish people. He fled to the community of his uncle, of Lavan. He had to stop off for 14 years to study Torah Shem Ve'aver. But ultimately, when he left, he was 63 years old. So when Hakol Kol Yaakov, when the bracha was given to Yaakov by his father, he was 63. 3 times Ehyeh is 63. Okay? So all that we're speaking now, the Ehyeh and the Ehyeh and Ehyeh, which corresponds, we said, to the first 3 letters of the 3 attributes of mercy. All the letters of the Torah adds up to be 21. The first letter of the patriarchs adds up to be 21. All this, what? If you add this all up, and it says Ehyeh 3 times, when did it fully crystallize? When there was Yaakov. Yaakov is the most special of the patriarchs. When did Yaakov achieve that level to be secure in his objective and his value? When he received the birthright from his father. He received the bracha, the blessing of his father when he was 63 years old. Okay? We're not finished. Ehyeh 3 times, which we said numerically adds up to be 63. How many letters are there in Ehyeh 3 times? 12 letters. There's 12 letters. What did 12 letters correspond to? Yud Bei Shvatim, the 12 tribes. So here, numerically 63, 3 times Eya. Each, you add up the letters of each Eya 3 times, it's 12. So the 63, does that 63 produce? It produces 12 tribes. Yaakov is the father of the 12 tribes. That's what he is. Now, how many letters are in the names of the tribes? If you take up all the names, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, Zebulun, all of them, and you add up all the letters, the 50 letters, and the names of all the tribes, okay? If you take the 50 tribes, the 50 letters of the tribes, and you add to them the names of the Avos, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, how many letters are in the names of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov? Then how many letters? 13. 13 letters. If you add the 13 letters of the Avos to the 50 letters of the tribes, you know what you have? 63. It all comes back to 63. Yaakov is 63. That's what he received, the bracha for the birthright. This is when he left to launch the dynamic to create the Jewish people, the 12 tribes. So that is what? So we said, Eyeth 3 times is 12 letters. So numerically it's 63, but what does that 63 manifest itself as? 12. Okay? The 50 letters in those 12 tribes, the names. You take the letters of the patriarchs, which add up, the first letter, each of them adds up to what? To Eya. It adds up 21, it's the first letter, it's Eya. In what merit is God with us? What merit do we merit the first 3 attributes of mercy in the merit of the Avos HaKadoshim? It all comes together. And now, if you take the letters of the 3, you take all the letters of the patriarchs, add it to the 50, I have 63. So why? Who's 63? That's Yaakov. So Yaakov encapsulated the totality of the Jewish people. He encapsulated within himself the totality of all the merit of all the patriarchs. And this is the Eya Shareya. This is the Balaturin with my embellishment or elucidation. Now, what is Nun? When did God give us the Torah? When is the holiday of Shavuos, the festival of Shavuos? It's 50 days after we left Egypt. That's Nun. Now, who received the Torah at Sinai? The 12 tribes. That's Nun. 50 letters. What does 50 always connote, as the Maral says? 7 is always natural order. 8 is always transcends the natural order. 8 is always supernatural. 50 is the one beyond 7 times 7. When was the Torah given? On the 50th. To who was the Torah given? To the 12 tribes, that the number of letters in their names is 50. Now, the Ramban, Nachmanides, in his introduction to Torah says that the 50 levels of Bina, God revealed to Moshe 49 of the 50 letters of Bina. That's understanding. There was nothing Moshe didn't understand. What is the 50th letter? What's the Shar Nun? The 50th Shar of Bina. Gate of Bina means insightfulness, fully understanding something. The 50th level is understanding the essence of God. Nobody understands that. As we'll see in the Ramchal, God is infinite. Any finite being, regardless how great the angel is, even Moshe Rabbeinu, a finite being cannot fathom the infinite. You have an inkling of what the infinite is, but to grasp it, not possible. So the Klal Yisrael of 50 letters, the 12 Shvatim, you add up the letters, is 50. The Torah was given on what? The 50th day after we left Egypt. And what did the Torah create? Yisrael v'Orais v'Kudshem B'Richu Chadu. That was the catalyst that connected us to God. We are 50. The essence of God is the 50th level of Bina. And it was given on the 50th day. And in whose merit did we receive it? In the merit of the patriarchs. But who was the ultimate patriarch? Yaakov. What guaranteed that that should actually happen? The blessing Yitzhak gave Yaakov. At what age? At the age of 63. So if you add the letters of the patriarchs to the 50 letters of the tribe, you have 63. And 50, as I said, was the day Torah was given at Sinai after we left Egypt. The 50 Shai Bina. And all this is what? The Torah itself is Eya. God says, I will be with you. God is always with us. Why is God always with us? Because that level of entry to become God's nation, once a Jew, always a Jew. That is our essence. We refer to Moshe Rabbeinu as Bonam Atem L'Shem Elokechem. We're God's children. As errant as a child may be, the child is still the child of his father, of the father. Regardless of how far we stray, we're still God's children. Bonam Atem L'Shem Elokechem. In this week's parsha, God says to Moshe, tell Pharaoh, B'ni B'chori Yisrael. B'ni B'chori Yisrael. My son, my firstborn, Yisrael. So Rashi cites the Midrash. If you read Rashi, this last week's reading, this was the first time God openly made a confirmation on the birthright that Yaakov had taken from his father. Yaakov is called B'ni B'chori Yisrael. He's the B'chor. As much as Esav may contest it, but factually, who is God's firstborn, which is the most beloved? B'ni B'chori Yisrael. It's Yaakov. Yaakov is 63. That's when you receive that birthright. Now that we're beginning, this is the beginning of the Gula, of the redemption, of the bondage, of the Eya. It's what? It's B'ni B'chori Yisrael. That's the essence of the Jew. This all eventually will be clarified to a greater degree when we continue learning the Ramchal, of an introduction to what he's going to say. What is the objective of creation, as he's been speaking? To achieve perfection. When God created Adam, as perfect as he was not perfect. Through what would he achieve perfection? He was given a challenge. What was the challenge? Not to eat of Eitz Hadas, not to eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge. If he would have achieved that, he would have achieved perfection. Because he failed, God says, the day that you eat of that fruit, Hamus, you'll be subject to death. If Adam would have met the challenge, he would have achieved perfection. Because you are perfect, you become eternal. But because you failed and you ingested the evil of that fruit, now you become finite. Meaning now you have to die. You cannot live forever. So the question is, well, after he ate of the tree of knowledge, why can't he achieve perfection? As initially, he was holding by 99.9999. All to achieve that 100%, he just has to meet the challenge. So now, let's say eating of the tree of knowledge brought him down 10 points, 20 points. Through his initiative, through his choices, let him bring himself back up to 100%. God says no. Once you've ingested that fruit, you must die. Meaning, the difference is, if you're holding at 99.9 or 99, all that's lacking is the distance from 99 to 100. There's nothing negative within your essence, within your being. So by meeting this challenge, this will bring you to the very top. Once you introduce this foreign element, which has nothing to do with perfection, this is something which does not allow perfection. So as much as you perfect yourself, You always have that weight around your neck, not allowing you to ascend to that perfect level. Because you always have that weight of impurity pulling you down. Initially, Adam was not impure, he was pure. What did he have to do? To achieve that 100%, he had to go that extra step. If he would have met the challenge, he would have met that extra step to achieve perfection. But he had nothing impure within himself. Once he ate of the tree of knowledge, which the Torah describes as tov v'ra, this is the essence, unadulterated evil is contained in that fruit. Now, as much as you try to achieve perfection, what do you do with the evil that's intermeshed in your being? That you can't somehow extract. That's not possible. So how do you extract it? The day you will eat, you will die. You become subject to death. Because the only way that could be achieved, you must die, you decompose in the ground, and when you be resurrected, what will be resurrected is only the pure matter. So if the pure matter, now we could speak. We could talk about achieving being in a perfect setting, which is ultimately the world to come. The world to come, I'm not speaking about the soul world, which we speak about the soul world. When a person dies today, his soul is put in a holding pattern. When we speak about Olam Haba, the ultimate world to come, we're speaking about the recreated world that will be recreated in the year 8,000. Body and soul, that anybody who's worthy of eternity will be resurrected. When he's going to be resurrected, what's going to be infused in that body, which is pure, doesn't contain that evil. The soul which achieved whatever achieved in this world with the challenges and whatever spirituality it achieved, that soul will infuse that physical body with that holiness, and it will radiate based on its level of achievement. So you could imagine, Moshe Rabbeinu died. As perfect as he was, he had to die. And even in his physical life, the Torah tells us that he radiated a holiness that people could not look at his holiness. That was the intensity of his holiness. Why? Because as much as a person could spiritualize that physical with that impure essence, that pure substance irradiated. But Moshe Rabbeinu, when it's meant to be radiate, that body doesn't meet the grade. Even Moshe Rabbeinu has to decompose a moment before resurrection, be resurrected pure, and that special neshama, which is Shokol Keneged Yisrael. Moshe's soul is the equivalent of the whole Jewish people. That soul will infuse that physical body with a level of holiness. We can't fathom what that is, because even in his life with impurity, it was unfathomable. So you can imagine in the future, in the new creation, to what degree that soul will spiritualize that physical body. And there's a question which is asked. Moshe Rabbeinu was the most special Jew who ever lived. Moshe Rabbeinu was Shokol Keneged Yisrael. His soul was the equivalent of whole Jewish people. That was the dimension of his soul. Now, the Gemara tells us, the Torah, when it speaks about Aaron getting married and telling us who his wife was, who was Aaron's wife? Elisheva bas Aminadab, Achos Nachshon. Firstly, she was from the tribe of Yehuda, and she was the sister of Nachshon ben Aminadab. Who was Nachshon ben Aminadab? Nachshon was the prince of the tribe of Judah. This is the most advanced level of pedigree. This is royalty. Aaron being the Levi, who's the pinnacle of spirituality of Jewish people, because the tribe of Levi never sinned. They weren't involved in the golden calf. And he is the lead of the elite. Aaron is the high priest. Not only is he Cohen, he's the high priest. Who is his wife? His wife is royalty. Tribe of Judah, the sister of the prince of Judah. That's who he married. And the Gemara tells us, whenever you marry a woman, you should always check and see who the brothers are. Because the majority of one's children manifest themselves, assume the characteristics of the brother of the wife. And since Her brother was so special. He was the prince of the tribe of Judah. Therefore, Aaron had the most special children. Nadav, Avihu, Alozi, Samar. Nadav, Avihu, that was their only sin. Although they were struck down by God, but that was their only sin. They were the future leaders of the Jewish people, but they failed. But in terms of the quality of who they were one of a kind. And who assumed the priesthood afterwards? Elazar and Isamar. When Aaron passed away, who became the high priest? Elazar, the son of Aaron. But why? Why were they so special? Because Elisheva, their mother, was the sister of Nachshon, so the characteristics she possessed within herself were actually the same characteristics of Nachshon. Therefore, her children were special, were so special. Now, who was greater? Moshe, Aaron. Moshe was greater. Moshe received the Torah on behalf of the Jewish people. Moshe's soul was the equivalent of the whole Jewish people combined. As it says, Shokol Keneg Yisrael. Who's Moshe's wife? Torah tells us, marries a convert. Could you imagine? The one of a kind of Torah sage in the history of the world marries a convert. I mean, someone like him should have married a woman who had the ultimate pedigree. Minimally, pedigree of Aaron's wife. He marries a convert. As they say in English, it doesn't make sense. I mean, how do we process this? So I'll tell you in a moment what the Maharal of Prague says. He says something interesting. But how did Moshe know that he was permitted, although Moshe had a sense of who he was, that he himself, this is when he married Tzipporah, he didn't know about the story of the burning bush, that ultimately he'll be called back to be the Redeemer of Israel, although he was told by his mother. When Moshe was born, it says his parents saw he was Tov. He was good. And that's why Moshe Rabbeinu's name that he was given by his parents, one of his names was Tuvia, or Tuvi. Tov means good. He was the ultimate good. How did they know he was so good? Now, before Amram remarried Yocheved, Moshe's mother, there was a decree that all male children should be thrown into the Nile. So what did Amram, Moshe's father, do? He divorced his wife. He says, what's the point? What's the point of having children if they're going to kill our male children? And when Amram divorced his wife, all Jews divorced their wives. They said, what's the point? There's no point in continuing. Miriam, at that age, she was only 6 years old. She already was a prophetess. At the age of 6, she comes to her father and she says to her father, your decree is worse than Paro's decree. Why? Because Paro decreed that the male should be killed. What you've done, you're denying that there aren't even female women going to be born. So your decree is, what you've done is more extreme than what Paro did. You know what Amram did when he heard and he says, not only that, she prophesied that you're going to be the parents of the future Redeemer of Israel. And he remarried his wife. Abram remarried Yocheved. When Abram remarried Yocheved, all Jews remarried their wives because of what Miriam had said to her father. Moshe is born. The house is illuminated. They saw he was good. They saw a radiance of Shekhinah, of the divine presence with him, that they knew this is for sure. This is going to be the Redeemer of Israel. This is the future. He's the Redeemer. Now, the Torah tells us Moshe was born premature. He was born after 6 months. The Egyptians, they actually checked from when Abram remarried Yocheved, they came to check after 9 months, was there a child born? So Yocheved was able to hide Moshe for 3 months because he was born after 6 months. So for 3 months, Yocheved had it. What did Yocheved do after 3 months? She couldn't conceal him anymore because the Egyptians were knocking on the doors. They were searching the homes for Jewish children. She constructed a box made of goma wood, some resinous material. She put them in the box, put them in the Nile. Okay? So if you read the story, at the narrative, it reads, so why was he found by the daughter of Pharaoh, the princess of Egypt? Because he was in this flotation device that she put him in, that's why he survived. But Chazal tell us, the Torah tells us differently. Why did Moshe not strike the Nile by the first plague? The first plague was blood. Why did he not strike the Nile? Because it would have been an action of an ingrate. Moshe Rabbeinu should have drowned. God performed a miracle and he changed the nature of the Nile, that he did not allow the Nile, which naturally should have drowned Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu survived the Nile. It would have been the behavior of an ingrate for Moshe to go to strike the Nile, to destroy it, to turn the water into blood. So who struck the Nile? Aaron struck the Nile. Moshe did not strike the Nile. So it was a miracle. So when Yocheved put him in that Nile, right? What was she doing? The flotation device was a faulty flotation device. Whatever it wasn't going to protect his life. But she put him in the Nile in either case. What's the point? Right? Why did she put him in the Nile? In the box? Because definitely the Egyptian, we'll talk in a moment. Once she put him in a cave, he should have buried him in the ground. As God performed the miracle in the Nile, he could have performed that miracle in the ground. Right? Why in the Nile? Now, the Torah tells us and describes what was the material of that box. It was Atze Gomer. It's wood which was a resinous material. Okay? And it says she waterproofed it from the outside with pitch, and from the inside she used lime. Okay? But with all the waterproofing and whatever she did, it's not going to hold water. Or I should say, it's not going to hold water. It will hold water. Plenty of water is coming into that box. So what was the point of everything? There's an argument in the Midrash, and I mentioned this in the past, when Yocheved purchased the material to build that box, did she buy the best quality wood, or did she buy the most inferior quality wood? So it's an argument in the Midrash. One person says, she bought the best quality wood. It's your son, putting him in the Nile. You don't leave a stone unturned to guarantee he's going to survive. The other one says, no, she purchased the most inferior quality wood. Why? Because the Gemara tells us, we learn from Yaakov, he went back for the earthenware vessels, which were barely worth anything, because Tzaddikim, they value their money the way they value their lives. It would have been a waste of money. So the obvious question is, we're talking about saving your child. What do you mean it's been a waste of money? You don't leave a stone unturned. You take every precaution to save his life. So what's the discussion? What's the argument? So we mentioned name of the Ramban that whenever a miracle is meant to happen, it always happens in a concealed state, not in a revealed state. Why? Because if people would be aware of miracles and see the hand of God continuously, it would undermine one's ability of choice. We have choice because we see alternatives. Maybe yes, maybe no. But if it's irrefutably continuous, we see the hand of God. That's what dictates existence. It doesn't allow a person to have free choice. So therefore, although Yocheved knew that Moshe and Amram, he's the future redeemer of Israel, putting him into the Nile, even if she would have put him directly in the water, he wouldn't have drowned. He wouldn't have drowned because he's the redeemer. So what's the point of putting him in a box? It's to conceal the miracle that people will attribute. The reason why Moshe didn't drown is that his box. So it's made of superior quality, inferior quality. Why did he not drown? Not because of the box. Because as secure as that box would be, ultimately he would have drowned. It's only to conceal the miracle. So Moshe's parents knew when he was born that this child is the future redeemer. And that's what their daughter at the age of 6 had prophesied. You will be the parents of the future redeemer of Israel. If that's the case, by you not remarrying our my mother, you're denying the future redemption of Jewish people. You remarries, and sure enough, Moshe is born. The house is filled with the divine presence. Okay, so Moshe Rabbeinu was nursed by Yocheved. Moshe Rabbeinu knew that they mentored him for the future. Moshe knew he was the redeemer of the Jewish people. Here he's now stuck in Midian because he killed an Egyptian. He fled. He's a fugitive. And who does he marry? Marries a convert. The future leader of the Jewish people who's going to bring the Jews to Sinai to meet the objective of creation, which is the receiving of the Torah. And he will send to heaven 40 days and 40 nights. Your wife is a convert. You think you should be the most advanced quality of pedigree. The greatest pedigree of the Jewish people, like his brother married. The tribe of Yehuda, which is royalty. Why does he marry a convert? But initially, he knew he was this. When he was a Midian, you take the first wife that presents itself. Because Yisro, he himself was a special person. You marry his daughter, Tzipporah. How do you know this? Now, we find when Moshe went to Midian, what was his first stop? At a well. Why did he stop at a well? Because we find his grandmother or his grandfather's servant, when he went to do the agency of Avram, where did he go? He went to a well. And that's where Rivka was. Rivka, the mother of Yaakov, was drawing water from a well with the pitcher. And that's where he found Yitzchak's mate, who was the future matriarch of the Jewish people. Yaakov, when he fled and he came to Choron, where did he go? He went to a well. Story with the shepherds with the boulder on top. And soon afterwards, who does he see coming? Rachel. She was the shepherdess. So yeah, Moshe says, my forefathers, where did they meet their zivug? What we call the bashert, the one who's meant to be, by a well. Goes to the well, all of a sudden he sees this whole fracas going on, these women and the shepherds. And not only that, the water rose. When he wanted to water the sheep of Yisro's flocks, it says the water rose towards him. And when Yisro heard this, he says, this person is a descendant of the Jewish people. He's a Jew. Although he looked like an Egyptian, he's a Jew. Because the water doesn't rise. So how did Moshe know it was the right thing to do? Because he went to the well, as Yaakov went to the well, as Eliezer went to the well. That was a confirmation that this woman is meant to be his wife. How do you understand it? Here he's this multi-dimensional person, the equivalent of the whole Jewish people. He's marrying a convert. You know what the answer is? If that's what God says, that's the way it's meant to be. But how do we frame it? In what context do we put it? So Moral of Prague is something phenomenal. We find we have 12 tribes. 12. Now, Ruvain was unique in his own right, and Shimon was unique, and Levi was unique. Although it's 12, each tribe complements the other to create the totality of Jewish people. But the spirituality of each of them was unique in its own right, that each one was a component to complement the other. But each tribe was not the same. Each one had its unique profile of spirituality, each one of the 12 tribes. It's cited based on Kabbalah as the 12 tribes, the 12 Sharim, the 12 gates in heaven. And initially when they prayed with a certain intent that each tribe had its gate, that its tefillah went through that gate. But ultimately, all of them are one. As I said, each one complements the other one. Now, every Jew has a limitation within the spirituality. If you're from Ruvain, your limitation is Ruvain. You're Shimon, you have the profile of Shimon. But Ruvain is not Shimon, Shimon is not Levi. Each one has its unique profile within spirituality. What is Moshe? Moshe is the totality of the Jewish people. Moshe being the totality of Jewish people, he can't marry just a Jewish woman. Because what is a Jewish woman? If she has the pedigree, she's from a tribe. If she's a tribe, he marries her. He's marrying a woman with a limitation. As much as she's more advanced than a convert, but she's a woman with a very specific profile, because that profile is the profile of that tribe. What's a convert? Convert has no identity. A convert is not part of a tribe. A convert attaches itself to the Jewish people. As I said in the name of the Ramchal, how do you take a non-Jewish soul, and when they convert and follow the process of conversion, that soul becomes Jewish, a Jewish soul? So he says it's like grafting a branch onto a tree. And if the graft is done right, the tree becomes part of the ecology of the tree. When the neshama, when the soul of the convert converts, it's attached to the Jewish people. So what dimension does it take on? Not a specific dimension. It has the profile of the total Jewish people. Moshe Rabbeinu, being the totality of Jewish people, he can only marry a convert, because she's a woman who doesn't have any profile, which he's locked into a very specific profile. She's a woman which reflects the totality of the Jewish people, as Moshe in his essence was the totality of Jewish people. That's why Moshe Rabbeinu could only marry a convert, regardless of the consequence, that his children were not as special as Aaron's children, because Aaron married royalty. His wife was the sister of Nachshon, who was the prince of tribe of Judah. Doesn't make a difference. But the only woman who was qualified that he could marry was only Tzipporah, who was a convert. But how did he know that was the way to go? How did he know he'd be the equivalent of the Jewish people? That doesn't make a difference. When he went to that wellspring and God sends him this woman, he knows that's his meant to be wife. That was it. That was the confirmation. How do we understand it later when he sees he is the equivalent of the whole Jewish people? Now he understands why it had to be this way. It couldn't be different for that reason. A moment. Go ahead. Go ahead.
But the question, Rabbi, is you've always talked about how important the name is at the time of a bris. Moshe was born already circumcised, and he was given the name Tov because it was good according to his mother. So then
He was given 7 names by his
Right.
parents. 7 names.
Okay.
Which all indicated this what his future was and what he was.
Right, but yet all that is negated or changed when Mayim Yishisihu, when Basha takes him out of the water and changes his name to Moshe. How are we allowed to change a name, and why is
Okay, 1 second. Now, Moshe is referred to Moshe by who? By God. The Torah records his name as Moshe. It's not his parents used that name. Basia, the princess of Egypt, he was her adopted son, and she was a very special woman. She converted. It says when she went down to the Nile, she converted to become a monotheist. She actually cleansed herself from the idolatrous past. That's what she did. Basia was the level that when she opened the box, she was able to see the divine presence with him. That's the level she was at. So that name was retained, and the Torah values that name. And the question is that why? Here he has names given by his parents. His father was the leading Torah sage of the Jewish people. His mother was the daughter of Levi. She wasn't the granddaughter of Levi, the daughter of Levi. She was born as they came through the walls of Egypt. When Yaakov had come, and you give the name of a woman who doesn't have the Jewish pedigree, that's the question which is asked. So the Sepharo addresses this, but I'll tell you what the Ksaf Sofer says. Ksaf Sofer says something phenomenal. Moshe Rabbeinu was the most humble person who ever walked the face of the earth. Avraham was also a very humble person, the second most humble person. Okay? Now, Avraham in his lifetime, until he was declared as the Prince of God, or until he left to go to Canaan, what was he? He was a fugitive. He was a pariah. He was discriminated against. He was persecuted. A person lives his life, 50% of his life in a persecuted state. Naturally, he's humbled because he already understands he's been mistreated, denigrated, discriminated against. Now, all of a sudden, he achieves success, but he's already seen life. It's through such a lens of reality. He doesn't become egocentric and pompous because he's learned what life is about. So even though he achieved great levels of humility, you could say part of that was attributed to a circumstance. Moshe Rabbeinu was raised as a prince. He was the son of a grandson of a king. And yet, despite that, he was honored. Moshe Rabbeinu's challenges were not the challenges of Avraham Avinu. Here, as they say, there's an expression, he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Moshe was born with a platinum spoon in his mouth. He was raised as a prince. And despite that, it meant nothing to him. When he saw the Egyptian beating the Jew, he killed him. The consequence meant nothing to him. Even if he has to flee and give it all up, he's leaving. And he did leave. And it wasn't part of the decision, should he kill the Egyptian, should not kill the Egyptian. But that was his level of truth, and he would not compromise truth or justice. Therefore, the Torah uses the name Moshe. Although he had the name that he was given by the princess, and he was raised as a prince, it's Moshe's honor Mikol Adam. Moshe is the most humble person who ever walked the face of the earth. That's the Ksaf Sofer.
Rabbi, is there any thought to the fact that Bashia, Pharaoh's daughter, she was the daughter of Pharaoh, and yet she rebelled against her father? She sees a Jewish boy in the Nile, he should have been killed. But yet, you don't see too many people.
Yeah, again, let me ask a question, but you saw Yisro. Yisro was also, he rebelled, he was ostracized by his community. I mean, is that the reason to give a name Moshe more than his parents? Good, so she's a convert. So you'd say maybe because you'd attribute Moshe's life because she plucked him out of the water. Maybe that you could say is an answer. Right. Moshe wouldn't be alive if she wouldn't have plucked him out.
Right, she went.
Wait a second, wait. But we said, even if Bas Paro didn't take him out of the water, as we said, he wouldn't have drowned. Because if he's meant to be the future redeemer of the Jewish people, the box was only to conceal the miracle. He wouldn't have drowned. She happened to have been the agent to be the one to take him out of the water. She facilitated, but under no circumstance, Moshe would have drowned.
Right. No, I understand.
Again, so go back to the original question. So if you have the name that his parents gave him, his father and mother were the most special Jews, and the name connoted exactly his essence, Tov, Tuvi, Tuvia, and everything. You give the name, even though she's a great convert. So what?
Right.
So the answer is with the Ksaf Sofer, it's very good. Because Moshe is Onav Mikol. Moshe is the name of royalty, and he was raised with royalty. Despite that, he's Onav Mikol. He was the most humble man who ever walked the face of the earth. Okay. Any other questions from the other participants?
Not a question, but an observation.